Hey everybody, welcome back to the sanctuary. I decided to shoot my video outside today just because the weather is so absolutely wonderful. But I wanted to provide a little bit more commentary for the wildfire subject. There was an article that came out this week in the LA Times. I guess I would say calling into question whether or not fuel reduction really is the answer, I guess, to the wildfires. And it really looks like there's, depending on the area that you're talking about and the climatic conditions that existed at the time, there are instances where fuel reduction seems to work, and then there were other instances where it either doesn't work or could potentially be making it worse. And so I think that's a little bit different than a lot of us thought how this was going to go. Because essentially what it feels like to me is that the government is starting to back off, and they're looking at their data and they're saying, we're spending this much money on fuel reduction. In some cases it might actually be accelerating fires. So what's another way that we can look at this? And the other way that they're looking at it is essentially home hardening, where you are responsible as a property owner for making your property fire resistant. So that means infrastructure, that means land management, in the sense that, what I think is going to happen is the government is going to start requiring rural property owners to, meet certain standards. They're going to be a lot more stringent on rural people, more along the lines of how they are towards urban property owners. And in the country, a lot of country folk don't really care much for the building inspector, the code enforcers, and so there's definitely going to be resistance. But I think that's essentially it reminds me a lot of when I used to do stormwater management in like the mid 2000s with the city of Portland, and what they did was they put it on the landowners to deal with their stormwater, because Portland's stormwater system was just so completely overwhelmed that they changed the requirements, that you had a certain obligation in order to deal with your stormwater. And I think that's what they're going to do here. Is the government's looking at it and they're saying this is not sustainable at what we're trying to do as far as putting out these fires, as far as fuel removal. What we're doing isn't working. And so we need to harden homes and we need to harden communities. And so that's why I really think it's going to be a couple different things. It's going to be infrastructure requirements. And that also includes, I've talked about this briefly before, utility lines. I think that it's going to be more requirements of you have to produce your electricity on your own. And I think the same is probably, we're going to start looking, will we need to have small power plants in communities? So I think that there's a lot of changes that are going to be coming down. You're going to be required to harden your home. You're going to be required to maintain a defensible area around your home to whatever feet your local county decides, or the state, I suppose. And then I think there'll be a continuing on of behavioral enforcement of you can't have this type of fire at this time, and all that's going to come down too. But it's really kind of fascinating if you think about it, because if the government is truly starting to pull back, that's one thing if you're talking about set aside lands for state or federal or nonprofits. But when you're talking about these large timber companies and these vast holdings that they have, is the government also going to start transferring the cost of firefighting to Weyerhaeuser? If the government starts pulling back and putting its resources into developing these hardened communities and just start letting areas burn, okay, well, like I say, it's one thing if that's like some kind of wildlife refuge, but if you're talking about our timber lands and we're in the middle of this housing crisis, and we keep going up and up in the cost of building, and at the same time we're going to be putting in all of these other restrictions which will drive up the cost of building a home in the country, will we see a reduction in population in the country? in the countryside. And what impact is that going to have on Sasquatch? Well, I think a lot of people, their first reaction would be, well, that'd be great. Less people, the happier Sasquatch is going to be. I don't necessarily think that's the case, because I think they are constantly raiding our homes, our properties. And I think that they're very accustomed to that, and they're reliant on it. And so this is going to have far-reaching implications. Like I say, the cost of housing, and just who picks up the tab for this, because I think the government is starting to look at it and saying, we're just going to be bankrupt if this is what we have to spend money on, and so it's kind of scary that it seems like we're pulling back a little bit psychologically in the natural resource management area, that people are really looking at, okay, how do we create bunkers essentially in order to survive these massive fires? Because no matter how much we think we can completely dominate the environment, we're never going to completely control it. And this may be one of those instances where we really can't keep up with it. So it'll be interesting to see where all of this goes, and what the reaction from people in the countryside in particular is going to be. But like I say, I don't. The way that the debate is starting to go now, it feels a little bit apocalyptic. I'll put it that way. So thanks again for tuning in.